podcast. My name is Rhiannon. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with my wife and cat, and I've been knitting for 11 years. This is the show, I guess, where I basically do a show and tell of my knitting and talk about my making plans and often, what I'm reading or, what I'm watching or listening to as I'm knitting. So if you're into that, this is what I'm going to be doing for the next hour-ish, hopefully less. I do have note cards today because I realize that a lot of times I will talk about a project and I will neglect giving all of the details. So the yarn that I'm using, the size I'm knitting, what gauge I got, that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to make sure I have all of that here and prepared. So I guess the cost of that is that then I have to look at a note card. So I will be looking away from the camera sometimes. I'm sure you can handle that. So I want to hop right in and start with talking about my works in progress. Now, you may find this relatable, but I have not completed anything since the last time I recorded. I feel like I've been working on the same projects for far too long, and that's just because life has been exceptionally busy. There's been a lot going on with work. I've traveled a little bit, and then I don't know about you, but I feel like when I go out of town, if I don't take a day off, like a buffer day or even two, my whole life is in a tizzy. Like nothing functions the way it should. Even if I come back to a perfectly clean house, I just somehow, I've got like laundry from my trip and then like everything falls apart. So I've just been, working away on the same projects for a long time. But I think it's worth sharing them. So here we go. The first thing that I'm sharing with you is my Niji pullover. Let's see if I can hold it up. That's where it is. I have separated for the sleeves, and then I'm working on this detail under the arm where the raglan, there's that raglan motif, I guess, that's like a ribbing, and then that sort of comes together under the underarm. I really love that about this pattern. It's the little details like that I think really drew me into it. So just to kind of recap all the details and information, this pullover is called Niji. It's by the designer Eri Shimizu. She has a lot of really cute stuff. I would say pretty modern and also classic enough that anyone could wear it. Like you don't have to be like super hip to wear it. This is knit with the Durarum Natura Gilead yarn, which is a DK to worsted weight yarn. I looked it up, 250 meters per 100 grams is what the ball band says. So, 260 something, I don't know, for yards. In my mind, that's more of a DK than a worsted, or that's like on the border, it's not anywhere near like what I think of as like Aran weight. I'm knitting this size 4, which if I was getting the gauge that was in the pattern would be 53.5 inches around, but my gauge is much tighter. There's no way that I could knit almost a DK weight yarn at 13.5 stitches over 4 inches. So like, I don't know, 3 point something, 3.25 or something for every inch. The three big loose stitches, right? I don't even like to imagine what that would look like. And so I'm doing mine and it's 16 stitches, and these are, pretty loose stitches, but I'm getting a solid fabric out of it. Here's one layer of fabric, my hand in it. I am using the recommended needle, which is the US 9s, and just at my gauge, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go up a size. And then, I did more math, but basically, there's just no way in heck. like I was gonna knit anything that loose, and my hands cramp when I use really big needles. So I'm really pleased to be making so much progress on this. I finally got under the underarm, and usually once you split the sleeves off on a top-down sweater, you feel like, okay, now I'm just knitting in the round on the body, and it's like very quick. A lot of times I will actually knit like an inch or two of the body and then pause and do the sleeves, because it's easier to do sleeves when you don't have that body sleeve thing flopping around. And I might do that, but what I'm also thinking is I might try to go up a needle size, or I might just try to A-line it, because this is fitting really nicely on my shoulders, which is usually what I try to size for, but it's not giving me quite that oversized look that the sweater should have. And so I do like how in the pattern photos, the oversizedness of it, like just like on this sweater that I'm wearing, you can see there's like extra fabric, and it just looks good in the pictures. But I think also when I wash this, it might loosen up a little. So it's okay if it doesn't, you know, if it's not like uber slouchy, because I don't want things that are like way too big, but I may just A-line it a little bit just to make sure that it's slouchy, especially down on my hips, which are bigger than my shoulders. So just to make sure that it, you know, it looks even. So that's the first whip, and my goal really was to finish this by Christmas, I think, because I wanted to do a Christmas Day cast on and not have other sweaters on the needles. But I'd like to finish it by the end of the month if I can, just because I have so many things on the needles. We'll see. The next project, I don't have it with me. It's at work. I use it for, you know, when I'm on break. But it is the Super Easy Baby Blanket by Purl Soho. I'm knitting that with Ralma's Baby Panda yarn, which is 100% merino. It is 191 yards per 50 grams, so it is kind of like more of a sport weight, I'd say, than a fingering weight. It doesn't feel like super wash, but it's machine washable. So this is just going to be a gift for someone who's having a baby, and I'm just, you know, I like this pattern because it's pretty mindless knitting and it's great for on the go. But it also, I think, looks nice, you know, and it's, it doesn't have, it's not too fiddly, but I think it's got texture, which, you know, babies like to, you know, kind of feel things once they get past a certain age. So I think it will be really nice. If I have a good up-to-date photo, I will insert it here. The next project I want to talk about is one that has just been stalled out completely since at least September, and that is the Puri Re socks by Yuka. As you can see, I have one sock that's pretty much completed other than ends being woven in. I bought some of this yarn. This is the Gems Luxe Fibers Yak Fingering. It is 60% merino wool, 20% silk, and 20% yak. It's a light fingering weight at 438 yards per 100 grams. And I had this idea of making myself just a really luxurious pair of socks that I would, you know, kind of wear like when I'm just watching TV on the couch or laying in bed reading, or, you know, when I'm not, like, I don't want to heavily wear them because, hello, silk, yak, but I also thought, why not treat my feet, you know? And then for the ribbing, I just found some white yarn that I had, which happens to be the Fiber Co. Amble. And I think this is just their undyed colorway. I don't know if it has a name. And this is 70% wool, 20% alpaca, and 10% nylon. It is almost more like a sport weight though. It's 355 yards at 100 grams. To me, that's almost 100 yards difference in weight from 100 grams of one to 100 grams of the other. So you can see like the top is like a lot thicker. And I don't like how, you know, when I did this little detail of the stripe around the heel, it created quite a big hole there. I don't know how I can fix that. I mean, it's a ladder, and it just looks pretty outrageous. I might duplicate stitch over it just to sort of clean it up, but I stalled out on this because I was trying to cast on this second sock. The other thing is it's toe up. You've got multiple balls of yarn going on. There's just a lot going on with this pattern, and I'm sort of trying to decide right now if I should like literally schedule time to work on this and just say I need to spend an hour on this at least, just getting myself up and running again, because here I have my little toe bit that's been cast on, and figure out what I did before. Here's the thing. I fell in love with the way that this pattern looks, and I didn't think about reading details, and I bought yarn for it. But as it turns out, it's for a DK weight sock. And so I have been sort of making up my own stitch counts, and you know, I've knit a lot of socks, so I kind of know like how many stitch counts the toe starts or ends with. I know how many stitches around I need when I'm doing, you know, I usually use like a US 1 or 1.5 needle to knit socks. I'm usually doing 56 stitches around the whole like foot and leg. So yeah, I also have to like figure out what did I do before, make sure my stitch counts match, and there's just like some fiddly parts. The other thing is I could just frog it, and I'm very reluctant to do that, but I do think there's enough going on with this that makes me uncertain. However, I have a very tight gauge, tightly knit, tiny little stitch sock, and part of me is like, do I want to frog that? Because then whatever happens is I still have to knit something else out of this yarn, right? And I do want to stick with my experiment of having really luxurious socks that are, you know, silk and yak and everything. So that's the status of this. Not a very satisfying status update. But I have had projects like this before that just kind of stalled out, and in my experience, if I do just set time aside and say today's the day I'm gonna like work through whatever issues I have with restarting this second sock, then usually I can get myself back on track, and then I get almost like a high from starting the second sock because I know I'm more than halfway done. I know a lot of people have like that second sock or second sleeve syndrome, and yeah, sometimes that happens, and it's more about like the complicatedness of starting it for me. But once you get going on it, then it's like really like, okay, yeah, now I'm 50%, now I'm 60%, now I'm 75% done, you know, and then it goes faster than the first one. So we'll see. I want to say too, like, I do really like both of these yarns. I'm not sure they're a great fit together, but I will be using both of these kinds of yarns. Again, I have another hank of the Gems Luxe yak fingering that I want to make a scarf out of, and I have another, I have like a whole thing of amble. I definitely am like, I need a sweater out of amble. It's really nice. One of my friends made a sweater out of it, and it's just like, I just like want to hug her when she's wearing it because it's really nice. And I think it seems like something that you would put on and not want to take off, you know, like it's real soft, like next to skin soft. So, yeah, no complaints about the yarn, or the pattern really. I'm just kind of a horse's ass and do things my own way and go, it's DK, but I'm going to make it fingering. Who cares? What could go wrong? So yeah, you know, it's kind of my fault. The next project I want to share an update on is my Pearl sweater. This is the pattern Pearl by Santa Fiala Knitwear. I think I am the first person on Ravelry to make this. I don't even understand how there aren't more projects or any projects of this, because even patterns that are like relatively new will have testers, you know, and there will be like 10 to 12 people who've made it. But I seem to be the first person who has tackled this one. So here it is. I am so close to finishing this sleeve. Really excited about it. And wanted to just share some of the modifications that I'm doing to this because it's so close to being done. So the first thing is, this pattern has a 2x2 rib. And I did a 2x2 rib on the bottom as instructed, and then I bound off loosely. I went up a needle size and bound off, well, a couple needle sizes, I think. And then just don't like the way the bind off is, so I will be redoing that bind off. It was painful doing this ribbing, not physically, but just emotionally, because it's a US 1.5 needle. So it is like a needle that you would use for a pair of socks, and it is many, many more stitches than a pair of socks. So imagine doing like a long, never-ending sock cuff. That's what this felt like. I think it looks decent, but I am considering redoing it because the bind off just really frustrated me, and I usually do everything with a sewn or tubular bind off. I went ahead and did 1x1 rib on the first sleeve. Looks great. I don't think it takes away from the design at all to have, oh gosh, that's my hair. You know, to have a 1x1 rib instead of 2x2. So now I'm thinking, what if I redo that bottom rib? Because I'm definitely doing the sleeves with 1x1. The collar, I'm debating if I do 1x1 with the tubular bind off or a folded over collar. I need to make that decision pretty quickly because I am closing in on the finish line with the sleeve. But I think once I finish the sleeve, then I will have a minute, you know, I'm hoping I will have a decision by then. But essentially the thing is I can do a tubular bind off with 2x2 rib. And there's a couple of ways to do that. One involves basically cabling all of the like every other stitch, so that when you have your 2 purls and 2 knits, like they go like this, right? And you switch, so then it becomes pearl knit or whatever. I don't like doing that. There is another way to do it that is really just like the tubular bind off, but it requires like 8 or 9 steps instead of 4, because you have to do 2 knit stitches and then 2 purl stitches, and I think it looks okay. It's what I did on these sleeve cuffs. I think it looks okay. It has plenty of stretch, but I still think on the purl stitches you have like a line across versus it just sort of seamlessly rolling in, you know, over, which is what the 1x1 rib tubular bind off does, right? It kind of looks like these stitches just like originate out of thin air. You don't really see that line across. So that's a thing to consider, you know. And I might just do 1x1 rib. You know, I'm thinking I might just make this my thing, right? Where it's like everything's gonna be 1x1 rib, regardless of what's in the pattern. And that's because that's the way I want to do it. The process has to be fun, right? Like, it can't be a miserable process. And I keep falling in love with these patterns that have 2x2 rib, but it's not the 2x2 rib that I love. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that'll change. I will just go over the details of this. I realize I just blazed past that again. So let me tell you about it. This is the Pearl Sweater by Santa Fiala Knitwear. I'm knitting it with Holst Garn Tides, which is a 70% wool, 30% silk blend. It's a light fingering weight. There's actually 314 yards per 50 grams. So like 628 yards per gram. It's basically a lace weight. I don't know. And it will bloom once you wash it because Holst Garn doesn't remove the spinning oil before they cake up their yarns and sell them, which helps keep the price low, but also means that the first time you wash it, you got to do like warm water and soap and try to get the oil out, and then it blooms really nice. There's a mohair version of this sweater where it's like a strand of fingering with mohair, and then there's just a strand of, you know, it says sport weight, but this is the yarn that's recommended in the pattern. And like I said, it's practically a lace weight. So I'm making size 4. I am getting the gauge recommended with the needles recommended. So I'm using US 2.5 needles. Painful, emotionally painful. And it's 26 stitches over 4 inches. I do think it would be way too tight of a gauge if you did a version with mohair. I would definitely change the gauge for that. And I do think that it's most sport weights, I think you would also want to maybe change the gauge. It's interesting that this is, you know, called a sport weight in the pattern. I am gonna try to, I think this will soften up really nicely when I wash it, but if it doesn't soften more, I'm gonna try to soften it by using hair conditioner, because when I tried this on, it looks way better with like no undershirt than, you know, I wear a lot of sweaters where it's like I have a t-shirt on underneath or something. I think this will be one to wear just by itself, and so then I'm gonna want it to be really soft. Okay, so I've talked at length about all of my current projects and just wanted to share one that I'm excited to cast on in the near future, and that is the Iris sweater by Trin Annalee. It is also knit with Holst Super Soft. I bought the yarn in a kit from Holst at the same time that I bought this yarn, and it comes with there's, I think, a couple kit variations, but the one I got is just the original color palette, and so it's got the colors Nougat, Cinnamon, Maize, Gold Crest, Topaz, Marlin, Pebble, and Bleached White. So it is, background color is this sort of off-white. The cuffs and all the ribbing are in white, which I think is a really interesting way to do it, because it's like another way of doing color work, you know, like another form of adding different colors in. And then it's mostly browns and a couple of like blue shades. So it's really pretty. It's really soft. It's like the colors that are right at my alley. And I just plan to knit the size 2 at the suggested gauge, or, you know, see what happens with my gauge and then maybe knit size 1, because one of my concerns with the pattern is just that the options of sizes are really far apart. And so if I knit size 1, and of course it's very like trendy and has been trendy for a couple years now to have, you know, a pattern where there's tons and tons of positive ease, right? Like 10 or 12 inches of positive ease. And I think the photo is like somebody wearing it with like 16 inches of positive ease. So they're just swimming in it. And I think that looks nice in the photo when you're just standing there looking cool. But in day-to-day life, I don't think a sweater with that much ease is very functional or enjoyable. And the size 1 is 44.5 inches around, which is for me, like, because I usually measure like armpit to armpit, upper bust, that would be like an inch of ease. That's not a, oh no, sorry, that would be a couple inches of ease. But it wouldn't be like a roomy sweater. And I do think it's designed because it's a drop shoulder. It should be a little bit roomy. But then the next size up is like 51 inches. So that's like almost 10 inches of ease if I'm just measuring that part. At the widest part of my hips, that's still like a few inches of ease. So I'm a little nervous about how far apart those sizes are. But I think I've got time to plan, right? And I've got time to swatch, because my goal would be to finish all of these other things before Christmas Day and then have that be my Christmas Day cast on, and hopefully maybe not have more than 1 or 2 projects on the go at that point. I was doing so good earlier this year with monogamous knitting, and now I'm back to 4 projects on the needles. We won't talk about how I also have a long-term crochet project that I always knew that would be a long-term project. I'm okay with it. But, you know, it's just like there's 4, potentially 5 projects on the go. And that's just knitting and crochet. That's not the sewing, the quilting, the home improvement projects that are all being neglected. Yeah, so I definitely want to catch up on some of those. And I thought I would just share too. So in addition to that Iris sweater, my other near future plan is to finish a dress that I started making like in the summer. It's terrible. There's literally fabric in my sewing machine just like sitting there. Like I just walked away from it and it's like there, like 2 pieces are halfway sewn together or something. It's pathetic. And of course it is a sleeveless maxi dress with like a tiered skirt. It's going to be beautiful. I won't be able to wear it once I finish it, for many months, because it is officially winter. I don't know if you knew that, but, today I woke up with snow on the ground. So, and it's been chilly. I think fall was very short, very gorgeous, but just went by way too fast this year. Fall for us starts in like mid-September, I'd say, and yeah, I don't know, it was too fast. The snow has melted now, but I just, you know, I just put my Christmas tree up because I'm like, I have to embrace it. It is that time of year already. Yeah. Side note, side tangent, and then I'll get back to talking about projects. This is a new mug I got from Katie Mudd, who is my favorite potter. There's like a cat chasing a leaf and stuff. It says, "I am an autumn," which is a joke from Gilmore Girls. I don't know anything about Gilmore Girls, but anyway, talking about near future plans. I watched this show called The Repair Shop. I just found out that YouTube has like 14 seasons of it, so I'm in heaven. And so now when I have things that need to be fixed, I call it The Repair Shop. So I have a button that fell off a coat. I need to sew that back on. And I think I'm going to redo the sleeves on this sweater. And that's why. So this is my Care sweater. I knit this out of the, one of the Wool Dreamers yarns. I should have these notes, but anyway, I made this project like over a year ago, and I really like this sweater, except these big flappy sleeves, because when it is cold, I do not want air getting in my sleeves. Now, I understand that the pattern has these wide sleeves, kind of because that's the style, but also because you have this band of color work on the sleeve, and then you only have like 6 inches after that in which to do decreases. So I may need to, because I need to take out like 4 inches. So I may need to figure out if I want to do, you know, more of that sleeve where you have like the tight cuff and like rapidly decrease before the cuff, and then you have kind of like a balloon sleeve or something like that, you know, or if there's a way I can somehow decrease very rapidly from the color work down. And this is something I'm gonna have to figure out with the Iris sweater too, because I will be starting from there, so I'll just decrease in the color work. I don't care if I have half a flower. It's better than having sleeves that don't function and that then I don't want to wear the sweater. And I think, you know, it sort of begs the question of, should I do 1x1 rib on here, because it would be tighter too, and then that wouldn't require quite as much decreasing, because this is what it would need to be. With the 2x2 rib, it's quite a lot of decreasing that needs to happen. So I've decided I'm just gonna go ahead and redo these sleeves on this. And then also, I finished a sweater earlier this year, like in January, the Duchess Crew. And I love this sweater. It is so comfortable. I wear it a lot, but it also has these big wide sleeves with these big floppy cuffs. And I just don't love that. Like I really actually don't love is too mild. I actually hate it. I hate that it does that, because it is like otherwise a perfect sweater, but it just ruins it for me. So I've got to deal with that. Another thing that this isn't really so much a repair as a replace, but my beloved Raya socks were knit with 3 different kinds of sock yarn. One of these things is not like the other, and I put this in the wash and the white felted very badly. So I have finally admitted to myself that wrestling these onto my feet is just not the way to do it. And the funny thing is I had kind of used up scraps, and so these don't match perfectly anyways. But I want to recreate this pair of socks. I want to buy yarns that go together, that at least, if not the same dyer, have the same base, right? So if it's like 80-20, 80% wool, 20% nylon, then the other two need to be 80-20 as well. And you know, if it's 4-ply, they're all 4-ply, or if it's 3-ply or whatever, you know, like I want to make sure that they're a good match and that I don't end up with this problem again. And it's just kind of heartbreaking because this dark blue was like one of my favorites. And I really loved this pair of socks. I really liked how they were scrappy and different, you know, like I made the lighter blue the main color and then the darker blue the main color on this one. But yeah, I need to like give up on these. And unfortunately, I don't even think I could like cut out the white and re-knit it with something better, because I think they've all sort of felted together too much at this point. Which if I had done that right away, it may have been a solution. I don't know. Like I could try, but I'm not sure if it would even be worth it. And they are, you know, they have been through they have been through a lot. So, you know, could someone just play taps for these socks, because I'm gonna have to redo these. Okay, I have one yarn acquisition to talk about and a pile of book acquisitions to talk about. So I recently joined the subreddit. No, I think I already shared this. I will cut this out if I already shared it. I recently joined the subreddit Yarn Swap, and the deals are unbelievable sometimes. I got 7 skeins of Magpie Fibers Nest Worsted in the colorway Twilight Linger, which is a grayish purplish color. It's a very soft, like lavender, like twiggy bark color. It really reminds me of some of the colors that you see in the natural landscape here in Wisconsin. So if you've never seen like a prairie in winter when everything's dead, it's quite astonishing because there are so many shades of brown, everything from yellow to purple to red to, I mean, it's like almost nothing is like just brown or like just boring looking. There's a lot of like black and gray and purple and just gorgeous shades actually of death. But yeah, this is just like one of those colors that I think kind of like fits that, and it's a little, you know, it's a little bit of a soft color that I don't usually wear a lot of soft colors, but I like it. I really like it. And yeah, I got all this originally $30 a hank. I got it for $18 a hank. Good deal. The other thing is, like I said, I was traveling this month, so the reason for the travel, some of the travel was work, and then the other reason was we went and saw Lord Huron perform in Milwaukee. And if you are familiar with this band, and you know, you've probably seen the chatter on live, this is like a phenomenal show. So for their latest album, which just came out this year, they've been doing this incredible tour, and they're also celebrating a 10-year anniversary of the Strange Trails album, which is my #1 favorite of theirs. And so they're playing songs from every album they've done on this tour, and every album has a different visual aesthetic that they incorporated into their live shows. So like there's very strong kind of like branding, I guess, around each album. And so they have created this like visual spectacular show, and it is so good. And we went to see them in Milwaukee. We didn't have the best seats, so we went back and saw them in St. Louis. I was just like, I would watch that show again. And so we did. And we went down to St. Louis for a few days, and it was incredible. So if you haven't listened to Lord Huron, I would say give them a try. Just like put it on and while you're knitting. I mean, it's very, very good music. Lots of instruments, lots of really talented musicians coming together to make a cohesive sound. And that's like, in some ways, I think that's one of my favorite kinds of music. Although, ironically, I listen to another group a lot called Nation of Language, which is just like a synthesizer and a bass guitar. But I do love that like many musicians, many instruments kind of sound. It really is special. So while we were in St. Louis, we hit up a bookstore, and then I also went up to Green Bay for a work trip, and I hit up a bookstore there too. So I'm going to share the books that I got. I'll start with Green Bay because I went there first. These are all my TBR to be read is 100 miles long. So I'm just sharing these books because I'm excited about them. Okay. So this one I totally bought for the cover because it's got hot pink letters and it's got this like crazy looking illustration of deer called Stag Dance. But it looks really fun. It says, in this collection of one novel and 3 stories, Torrey Peters' keen eye for the rough edges of community and desire pushed the limits of trans writing. In Stag Dance, the titular novel, a group of restless lumberjacks working in an illegal winter logging outfit plan a dance that some of them will volunteer to attend as women. Okay, so just like off the bat, I'm like, that is a weird story. Like, they've got an illegal logging camp, and half the lumberjacks are going to go to this party as women. I'm just like, I'm hooked right away because it's such an odd premise. And then I saw an author that I really like, Carmen Maria Machado, wrote one of the blurbs on the back. So I was like, okay, you got me. Crazy looking cover, exciting, interesting cover, weird premise. One of my favorite authors recommending it. Sold. The next one is The Seventh Veil of Salome, which is the most recent book by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I love her. I love her so much I've accidentally bought one of her books more than once, okay? But this is, let me just read you the premise, okay? 1950s Hollywood. Every actress wants to play Salome, the star-making role in a big-budget movie about the legendary woman whose story has inspired artists since ancient times. So when the film's mercurial director cast Vera Larios, an unknown Mexican ingenue, in the lead role, she quickly becomes the talk of the town. Vera also becomes an object of envy for Nancy Hartley, a bit player whose career has stalled and who will do anything to win the fame she believes she richly deserves. 2 actresses, both determined to make it to the top in Golden Age Hollywood, a city overflowing with gossip, scandal, and intrigue, make for a sizzling combination. I'm like, yeah, totally sold. I mean, I was sold just because it's Silvia Moreno Garcia. It also happens to be an autographed copy, so that's pretty cool. And I can't wait to get to that. I have to get through the book that I've been reading forever and a day, which is The Mirror and the Light. You can see I'm past the halfway point at long last. But I have been just reading really slowly this year. I just haven't had much reading time. So kind of like with my knitting projects, everything's just happening at a glacial pace right now. But okay, on to the books I got in St. Louis. I got Before We Were Trans by Kit Higham. This, I actually saw an interview with this author a long time ago before this book came out, and I was super fascinated by it because I think there's like a very well-intentioned goal to like reclaim trans people throughout history, but as trained historians, we're like we're kind of taught, like, part of your training as a historian is don't use modern terminology for people in the past because you don't know really what their experience was. So there's a sense in which our experience, or what we say our experience is, right? Like for me to say that I am biracial or something, right? It's like, that's a term I'm still not really easy with, because it's only in the past 15 years or so that Latinos have become racialized, right? Like that was always sort of understood as an ethnicity, not a race, but it's starting to become racialized. And biracial is a word that I think people understand immediately and connect with. And when you say you're bi-ethnic, people don't necessarily know what that means, or they've never heard that word. And so parts of our identity are mediated by the language we have to describe ourselves, right? And so we might adopt language to describe ourselves because it's the lingua franca of our times, but it might not 100% fit. And the other thing is that, people throughout history have maybe done things for different reasons, right? Like there were people in ancient Rome, and this was part of like my research when I was in school was, you know, there were people who were, for all intents and purposes, drag queens and or transgender women, but for them it was a religious experience. So it was a specific group of priests who were priests of the goddess Kybele and would present themselves as women. But the reason they were doing it was, you know, at least one of the reasons they were doing it was for, I mean, to have that religious job, right? it was the job duty, or it was in the job description, and it was like a religious thing, right? It was being devoted to a particular goddess. So I think, like, you know, just to say like, oh, that's a trans woman, like that sort of minimizes the complexities of why someone did that. So anyway, I'm not sure, I may have already like listened to this on audiobook, but I saw it in the store and was excited to buy it because it is really about like these experiences in history that are like before modern language, right? To describe the experience of living, working, loving as a different gender other than the one assigned or assumed at your birth. So, oh gosh, I have a sliver now. Anyways, I saw an interview with Dr. Kit Hyam and was like, this is such a fascinating book and like field of study, because when I was studying for my master's degree in history, I ended up in learning a lot about people whose gender varied from what was considered the usual in ancient Rome, because I was studying cosmetics and bodily presentation. So anyway, I picked up the new novel by Han Kang. She is an amazing author. I think I talked about the book Human Acts earlier this year, maybe. I read it early this year. She writes these really short, really impactful novels. This is a person, it's sort of like the polar opposite of the book I'm reading, because this is like one of those books that is really thick and long and really dives into everybody's motivation and the story, and it's like part of why you read it is because the language is so beautifully written. There's so much description and everything. And then this is like the absolute opposite, where the language is so sparse that it really leaves you room to fill things in, but it also just sort of paints a picture of the barest facts. And it reminds me of, because she often writes about like things that are like very sad, tragic. It reminds me of how if you have a traumatic memory, you won't remember, you know, whether it was rainy that day, or, you know, what the house smelled like, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's like people will remember these like snippets of information when they have a really impactful experience. And that's what her writing reminds me of, is it's just the facts, just the bits that you need to know. And then it's not telling you how a character feels unless the character comes out and says, I feel like this. Last book I picked up, I was so excited to find this because I couldn't find it at the store in Green Bay. Anyway, Virginia Roberts Giuffre's memoir. I think she's such a profile in courage of somebody who opened a door for other people to speak out about what they've been through. And when somebody does something that has, you know, potentially such massive consequences in our world, I feel like the least I can do is bear witness. And so I'm very excited to read this book. I know it's going to be a hard read. I know there are going to be parts where I want to put it down. And so I think when I read it, I'm going to try to maybe read it in tandem with, say, a novel or something that's like maybe a little more humorous. I don't know. But yeah, that's all the books that I've got. I have a couple other media recommendations, just kind of like shit that you can knit to. I am very excited about a new podcast from Sarah Marshall. She does You're Wrong About. I'm a big fan of the Michael Hobbs extended universe, or whatever you call it. But Sarah Marshall and Michael Hobbs started You're Wrong About, then it became Sarah Marshall with a series of guests. And one of the things that never really came to fruition on that podcast was her talking about deep diving into the Satanic Panic, or she was like, maybe I'll write a book about it, and it turns out she did a podcast that's all about it. So it's about the Satanic Panic, and there's amazing interviews with like the ex-wife of the author, one of the authors of Michelle Remembers. I mean, people who you know, kind of had like firsthand brushes with some of these like big incidents. It's pretty amazing. Another podcast I've been listening to more, just because life be lifin' and I need a laugh, is the Handsome Pod. It's Tig Notaro, Fortune Feimster, and Mae Martin, and they are just kind of just shooting the shit and laughing, and then they usually have like a celebrity guest who will ask a question that they answer. I don't normally like podcasts where people are just kind of yakking, you know, like I like podcasts that have a theme, that have a purpose of, we're gonna, you know, tell you all about this story. But I don't know, like when things are hard, like sometimes it's kind of nice to just listen to people being funny. So I've been consuming more like stand-up content overall this year. I went and saw Jim Gaffigan this year. It was really great. And I think just like, I don't know, a little more humor in my life is kind of needed. I got turned on to that podcast because I saw the Netflix show Wayward that Mae Martin wrote and starred in. And I highly recommend that show if you like kind of weird stuff, kind of cultural commentary, but also like creepy culty. Yeah, like I'll just kind of leave it at that, but it's like there's like cultiness going on. So yeah, that's a fun one. I also watched Boots on Netflix. I loved that show. I felt like it really did a good job of illustrating how people join the military for a myriad of reasons, and how people are searching for belonging, and how that's one of the places they can get it. And I know that they're like, I've talked about like another book I read that, you know, said that the military is basically a cult, and I have mixed feelings about all of that. I have, you know, family members who are in the military and got a lot of a sense of belonging and brotherhood out of it. And I think that, yeah, Boots is just like a fun show, and it's fairly lighthearted. I would say there's some really dramatic, sad stuff in it, but for the most part, it is more lighthearted because it's centered on kind of one person's experience. And I just started watching the new Interview with the Vampire that's on Netflix. I'm definitely going to be knitting to that because there's really it's not like one of those things where you have to like pay close attention to understand the story, but it's just highly entertaining. And I think the funny thing is I always had a beef with how they cast the original movie Interview with a Vampire, because I was like, why is Brad Pitt playing Louis? Why is Tom Cruise playing Lestat? What, you know, like other than Kirsten Dunst, like I felt like every single character was poorly cast from an aesthetic perspective. I mean, they had like a 40-year-old guy playing like a 18-year-old guy, you know, it was just weird. And then this one is the opposite. But I will say, one of the things that worked with the original is that everybody in it acted the shit out of their roles. Like, so it was obvious they were just trying to put a bunch of stars in the production, and then this one I think they put more thought into having the characters be more like they are in the book. But then they also sort of expanded on some of the characters' stories in a way that I think is really interesting, and I'm enjoying it so far. You know, I think there was one scene I didn't like where somebody drinks the blood of an animal, and it made me sad because for some reason seeing a little baby animal die is way worse than seeing a human die on TV. I don't know why, but it's the innocence of a little animal. I don't even know if it was a baby animal. It was just an animal. That made me sad. But okay, I think I've talked enough. Listen to Lord Huron. Go ahead and listen to Nation of Language too. Read Han Kang books. Seriously, they're all amazing. Read Hilary Mantel. Read Virginia Giuffre's memoir, etc., etc., and have fun knitting. All right, bye.